Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're taking a deep dive into, well, one of the 20th century's most captivating and, frankly, heartbreaking puzzles, the disappearance of Amelia Earhart.
Absolutely. It's a story that just keeps pulling people in.
And we've got a stack of sources here, articles you provided, exploring her incredible life, her groundbreaking career, the details of her final flight, the huge search efforts.
And of course, all the different theories trying to explain what happened. It's quite a lot to sift through.
It is. So our mission today is to really dig into the specific material, pull out the key facts, the insights, and, try to understand this enduring enigma together.
Looking at these sources you shared, what really jumps out is how Earhart was more than just a pilot. She was a real symbol. Courage,
A
ambition.
trailblazer,
Hmm.
definitely, aiming to circle the globe.
Exactly. And then vanishing like that into the Pacific. It's just this persistent mystery that, well, it still fascinates everyone.
It really does. Diving into your material on her background, born July 24, 1897, in Kansas, she seemed to push boundaries right from the start, didn't she?
Oh, yeah. Playing basketball, taking auto repair courses, not typical for girls back then. She even served as a nurse's aide in World War I.
But that first plane ride in December 1920, your sources really highlight that as the moment. Hooked forever.
Completely. Led straight to flying lessons with Nita Snook, and by late 1921, she'd bought her own plane, a second-hand Kinner Airster.
That's the one, nicknamed the Canary. It shows incredible drive, going from just a ride to owning a plane so quickly.
And that drive immediately turned into action, into setting records. Your articles detail this really well.
Like in 1922, becoming the first woman to fly solo above 14,000 feet. Pretty amazing start.
And then 1932, your sources mark this as a huge year for her. She became the first woman and only the second person after Lindbergh to fly solo across the Atlantic.
Wow, from Newfoundland, Canada to Northern Ireland,
That's good.
incredible.
And she got the Distinguished Flying Cross for it. The first woman ever to receive that military decoration.
That's serious recognition. And your material says the same year, 1932, she also made the first solo, nonstop flight across the U.S. by a woman, L.A. to Newark.
She just kept breaking barriers. Then in 35, the first person to fly solo from Hawaii to the mainland U.S.
But it wasn't all about her own fame, was it? The sources make it clear she was a big advocate for other women in aviation.
Very much so. Helping form the 99s in 1929, that international organization for licensed women pilots, she was its first president.
So that commitment, that drive, it wasn't just personal ambition, it was about opening doors.
And that spirit, I think, really feeds into the 1937 flight attempt, which is described so extensively in your material.
Right, her second try at circumnavigating the globe, becoming the first pilot ever to do it. She took off from Oakland, California, June 1st.
In that specially modified Lockheed 10E Electra, a twin-engine plane built for long distances.
And crucially, as your sources point out, she wasn't alone. She had Fred Noonan with her.
An experienced navigator, yes. Highly skilled, absolutely essential for that kind of journey over vast oceans.
So the goal, reading your material, it wasn't just about setting records. It was also about, well, inspiring women, pushing the limits of what people thought was possible.
And they made incredible progress initially. Flew down to Miami, across to South America, over the Atlantic to Africa.
Then east across India, Southeast Asia. By the time they reached Lae, New Guinea on June 29th, how far had they flown?
About 22,000 miles, according to your sources. An immense distance already covered.
With just 7,000 more miles to go to get back to Oakland, they were on the home stretch, relatively speaking.
But here's where your sources really emphasize the difficulty ramping up. That next leg, from Lae to Howland Island.
Tiny Howland Island, just a speck in the Pacific.
Exactly. It was their most challenging leg by far. A 2,556-mile flight, mostly over empty ocean.
And they were relying heavily on celestial navigation, using the stars and radio contact, right?
Yes, radio contact with the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca. It was stationed off Howland specifically to help guide them in with radio signals.
Okay, so they depart Lae for Howland on July 2nd, 1937.
And that's it. The last time anyone confirmed seeing Amelia Earhart alive.
Somewhere out there, over the Pacific, they lost radio contact with the Itasca.
Your sources describe those final transmissions.
Yeah.
They're fragmented, a bit desperate sounding.
Yeah, indicating they were low on fuel, struggling with finding their direction.
Flying in overcast conditions, apparently,
Yeah.
which would have made celestial navigation really difficult, maybe impossible.
And they seemed to think they were close to Howland, but just couldn't see it.
Which brings us to that really chilling final message mentioned in your material. The last verifiable transmission on July 2nd.
We are on the line 157337. We are running on north and south.
And then nothing, just silence.
Wow. Just gone. The reaction must have been immediate.
Oh, huge. President Roosevelt himself authorized a massive search. Your sources call it one of the largest in history at that time.
A Navy, the Coast Guard, scouring hundreds of thousands of square miles for 2 weeks.
An incredible effort. But, as your sources confirm, they found absolutely nothing. No wreckage, no sign of the plane or the crew.
So, on July 19th, 1937, they were officially declared lost at sea.
And that lack of any physical evidence is really why the theory started and why they persist today.
Okay, let's really get into those main theories presented in your material. The official position, the one held by the U.S. government, is the crash and sink theory, right?
That's the most straightforward explanation, yeah. Based on those last messages, the weather, the distance. The thinking is they simply ran out of fuel while searching for Howland.
And crashed into the ocean nearby.
Exactly. And the reason nothing's been found, well, the Pacific is incredibly vast and incredibly deep right there. Finding a small plane wreck is like finding a needle in a million haystacks.
Your sources even mention recent high-tech searches near Howland using sonar and deep-sea robots.
And they still haven't found anything, which, for supporters of this theory, kind of reinforces the idea that it's just lost to the depths.
But then there's this other major theory, the one actively pursued by TIGAR, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, the Gardner Island hypothesis.
Right. This suggests something quite different. TIGAR believes, based on their analysis detailed in your sources, that Earhart and Noonan might have actually missed Howland Island.
And veered off course.
Veered southwest, possibly landing on what was then called Gardner Island. It's now Nikomaro, about 350 miles away from Howland. It's an uninhabited atoll.
And your sources mention Navy planes flew over Gardner Island about a week after the disappearance.
They did. And they noted signs of recent habitation, which was odd for an uninhabited island. But they didn't see a plane.
So TIGAR's idea is that Earhart and Noonan landed there, maybe damaged the plane on the reef, and survived for a time as castaways.
That's the hypothesis, that they might have survived for days, maybe even weeks, sending out distress calls that weren't pinpointed before eventually succumbing.
And TIGAR expeditions, your material says, have found some intriguing artifacts on Nikomaro.
Yes, things they believe could support the castaway theory, like a piece of plexiglass, possibly from the Electra's window.
A woman's shoe from the 1930s, some improvised tools, a cosmetics jar.
Even some bones that initially looked like part of a human finger, though later analysis was inconclusive. These specific items are presented in your sources as potential clues.
But it's important, looking at all the info in your sources, that nothing is definitive, right? There's counter-evidence or ambiguity.
Absolutely crucial. For instance, a 2017 TIGAR search with bone-sniffing dogs, mentioned in your material, found no human remains or DNA.
And Robert Ballard, the guy who found the Titanic, searched the waters around Nikomaro in 2019 with advanced tech.
And also found no sign of the Electra wreckage. So, while the Gardner Island hypothesis is compelling, the evidence TIGAR presents remains debated, not proven.
Okay. Beyond those two main theories, crash and sink near Howland or castaway on Nikomaro, your sources briefly mention some other theories.
Yeah, the kind that often spring up around famous unsolved mysteries. Conspiracy theories, basically.
Your material mentions one about them being captured by the Japanese, maybe executed as spies.
That one pops up, often linked to Japanese expansionism in the Pacific at the time. But your sources are quite clear. The evidence for this is described as very weak or even debunked.
And another claim that they were actually spying for the U.S., faked their deaths, and came home under new identities.
Yes, that one's also mentioned, but again, your material describes it as largely discredited. We're just relaying what's in your sources here, showing the range of speculation.
It really shows how much people want an answer, any answer.
It does, and it's clear the search, in some ways, hasn't completely stopped. Your sources mention ongoing efforts, especially by groups like TIGAR, still using modern tech.
A testament to how much this mystery still grips people.
Definitely. But regardless of how she disappeared, Amelia Earhart's legacy is secure. Your sources paint her as this powerful feminist icon, a symbol of courage.
A true pioneer, breaking barriers for women in aviation when it was almost entirely a man's world.
Absolutely. And her disappearance.
Well,
Why does it still fascinate us so much? You touched on it earlier.
I think it's that combination, the allure of the unknown, the sheer tragedy of such ambition cut short, that very human need for closure.
And her story's impact on popular culture is huge, isn't it? Books, movies, songs, all inspired by her life and disappearance, as your material notes.
Unexplained disappearances just seem to haunt our collective consciousness. They leave a void.
They really do.
So, wrapping up our dive into your sources, we come back to that core enigma, this amazing, trailblazing aviator, a daring flight around the world.
And then just silence over the vast, empty Pacific.
Did her plane crash and sink near Howland? Is it lost forever in the deep ocean?
Or did she end up on Nikomaro, leaving tantalizing but ultimately unproven clues on a remote atoll? The mystery absolutely endures.
Her disappearance really is a powerful reminder, isn't it, of the risks that come with huge ambition, the sometimes unforgiving nature of the world.
And just the enduring power of a great unsolved mystery.
So the final thought to leave you, our listener, with, will her final resting place ever truly be found?
Right now, it feels like only the depths of the Pacific really know the answer.